Tonight's story takes place in the quiet library of a medieval abbey. Stone walls rise high above rows of cupboards and lecterns, where manuscripts have been gathered and cared for over generations. Oil lamps burn behind thin panes of horn, spreading a steady glow across desks worn smooth by years of careful work. Here, a monk entrusted with the care of the abbey's books moves slowly through the room, checking bindings, turning heavy pages, tending the lamps, and returning each manuscript to its place. In this old stone chamber, the work of preserving knowledge continues in calm and patient rhythms. So settle in, and let the lamplight and the quiet routines of the Abbey Library guide you gently into rest. The light comes from the oil lamps set in their iron brackets along the walls, small flames burning steady and golden behind thin panes of horn that soften the glow and spread it gently across the stone. The walls rise high on all sides, pale gray blocks fitted close, their surfaces smooth from centuries of lime wash and the passing of hands. The ceiling curves overhead in a gentle vault, and the space it creates feels both vast and enclosed at once. Tall enough that shadows gather in the upper reaches where the lamplight cannot reach. Close enough that the warmth from the small brazier near the center of the room fills the air and settles into the stones, into the wooden furniture, into the thick layers of vellum and leather that line the shelves. The smell is parchment and beeswax, old wood, and the faint smokiness of the brazier's coals. Beneath that, something deeper, the particular scent of a room that holds many books, where vellum has been stretched and written upon and bound, where oak and iron have stood together for decades, where dust is not dirt, but the fine powder of age and stillness. He stands beside the reading desk, his hands resting on its worn surface, feeling the smoothness of wood that has been touched 10,000 times, rubbed to a soft sheen by sleeves and palms, and the edges of manuscripts moved into place and moved away again. The desk is heavy, solid, its legs thick and carved with simple patterns that disappear into shadow near the floor. A manuscript lies open before him, its vellum pages spread flat beneath the weight of two small leather markers positioned at the outer edges to hold the binding taut. He reaches forward and lifts the right-hand marker first, feeling the smooth coolness of the leather between thumb and forefinger, and sets it aside on the desk surface with a soft tap. Then the left marker, removed with the same measured motion, placed beside its companion. The pages want to close. He can feel this in the way the vellum shifts slightly, the parchment memory pulling the leaves back toward the center. He slides one hand beneath the right-hand page, supporting it from below, and begins to turn it over, slowly allowing the stiff material to bend without resistance, letting gravity do the work rather than forcing the fold. The page lifts and arcs, and settles onto its opposite with a whisper. He smooths it once with the flat of his palm, pressing gently to encourage it to lie flat against its neighbor. The next page turns the same way. and the next, each one requiring the same careful lift and arc and settling. The vellum is thick here, well prepared, and it holds the ink without bleeding. The letters are dark and clear in the lamplight. His fingers move along the edge of each page, finding the corner, lifting, turning, smoothing. When the manuscript is closed, he rests both hands on its cover for a moment, feeling the tooled leather beneath his palms and the slight give of the binding, the substantial weight of the text. Then he lifts it, cradling it against his chest with both arms beneath, taking the full weight into his body, and carries it across the stone floor toward the cupboard that stands against the far wall. His footsteps make almost no sound. The soles of his shoes are soft leather, worn thin over years, and they meet the stone with only the faintest scuff, a rhythm that matches his breathing, that becomes part of the silence rather than breaking it. The manuscript is heavy. He can feel the strain in his forearms, the pull in his shoulders, but the distance is not far, and he reaches the cupboard without needing to adjust his grip. The cupboard doors are already open, left that way from earlier. Inside, the shelves hold other manuscripts, each one wrapped in cloth or resting in leather cases, stacked carefully with the spines facing outward where they can be read. He bends slightly at the knees, lowering the manuscript he carries onto the middle shelf, sliding it into the gap between two others, making sure it sits level, making sure the weight distributes evenly and will not cause the shelf to bow over time. He straightens, then reaches for the cloth that drapes over the shelf above, a length of undyed linen, woven tight and soft from washing. He draws it down and forward, letting it fall across the manuscripts below, covering them, protecting them from dust. The cloth settles with barely a sound, and he smooths it with one hand, his palm moving from left to right across the surface, ensuring no folds, no creases that might press into the leather beneath. There is another manuscript on the lectern near the wall, resting at a slant against the wooden support. He crosses to it, his shadow moving with him across the stone floor, stretching and shrinking as he passes between the pools of lamplight. The lectern is old, its wood darkened by handling and time, the grooved rest worn smooth where countless volumes have leaned against it, where countless pages have been turned above its surface. He reaches the lectern and places both hands on the manuscript that waits there, feeling the boards beneath his palms. Thick oak covered in leather, the grain of the wood visible as slight ridges under the hide. The binding is dark brown, tooled with simple lines around the edges, and when he lifts the volume, taking its weight into his hands, he feels the familiar heft of vellum gathered and sewn, the density of text and margin pressed between covers that exist to protect what they hold. The manuscript is not the largest in the library, but substantial, and he adjusts his grip, supporting the spine from below, so that no strain pulls at the stitching. He carries it to the nearest table and sets it down with care, lowering it until the bottom board meets the wood with a soft sound. Leather against oak, a muffled tap that barely disturbs the quiet. He opens the cover slowly, lifting the front board and letting it fall back against the table surface. The end paper inside is plain vellum, undecorated, and it shows the small stains and marks of age. A faint brown spot near one corner where moisture found its way in years ago. A crease along the edge where the page was turned too quickly once and folded against itself. He smooths the end paper with his palm, pressing gently, feeling the slight roughness of the vellum's surface, the way it has dried and stiffened over time. The first page of text lies beneath. The ink is dark, the letters formed with precision, each one shaped by a hand that worked slowly, that knew the value of clarity. He does not read the words. He looks instead at the condition of the page itself, checking for cracks in the vellum, for places where the surface has begun to powder or flake, for any sign that the material is failing, that preservation requires more than what routine care can offer. The page is sound. He turns it, sliding his hand beneath the lower edge, lifting it over and guiding it down to rest against its neighbor. The next page receives the same examination, and the next. His eyes move over the surface of each leaf, noting where the vellum is smooth and where it has roughened slightly, where the ink has bled into the fibers and where it sits crisp and black on top of the prepared surface. Halfway through the manuscript, he finds a page where the edge has begun to tear, a small split along the outer margin, no longer than his thumbnail, where the vellum has grown brittle and given way. He pauses, touching the tear with the tip of one finger, feeling the separation, the way the two edges no longer meet. The tear does not threaten the text. It sits well away from the written area, out in the margin where only emptiness would be lost. But it will grow if left unattended, will spread inward with each turning until it reaches something that matters. He lifts the manuscript again, carrying it across the room to a chest that stands against the wall near the brazier. The chest is oak, its surface unadorned, its lid heavy and fitted with iron hinges that have darkened to near black with age. He sets the manuscript on a nearby table and opens the lid of the chest, the hinges creaking softly. Inside the chest, the space is divided into compartments. One holds rolls of vellum scraps, pieces salvaged from damaged pages or trimmed from margins when manuscripts were rebound. Another compartment contains spools of linen thread in various thicknesses, the fibers waxed to help them slide through needle holes without fraying. A third holds bone folders, small awls, a curved needle already threaded. He selects a narrow strip of vellum from the roll, measuring it against the torn page with his eye. Then he takes the bone folder, smooth and pale, worn to a gentle curve by years of use, and scores the vellum strip to the length he needs. The material bends along the score, and he folds it carefully, creasing it with the edge of the folder, then tears it free with a soft, ripping sound that seems louder than it is in the lamplight quiet. He sets the strip aside and lifts the threaded needle from its place, feeling the wax on the thread, the way it makes the linen slightly stiff, slightly tacky against his fingers. He returns to the table where the manuscript waits, turns to the torn page, and begins the work of repair. The needle slides through the vellum just beside the tear, the point finding its way through the parchment with a faint resistance and then yielding, pushing through to the other side. He draws the thread after it, slowly, letting it pass through the hole without pulling too hard, without stressing the material around the puncture. The vellum strip is positioned along the tear, bridging the gap, and he brings the needle back through both layers, the page and the reinforcement, creating a stitch that holds them together. Another stitch, and another. The thread passes through and draws tight, not pulling the tear closed but supporting it, preventing it from spreading. His hands move with the practiced ease of repetition, the needle finding each new point of entry, the thread following, the stitches forming a line of small knots along the margin that will hold long after his hands have finished this work. When the repair is complete, he ties off the thread and trims the excess with a small knife kept in the chest for this purpose, the blade sharp enough that it cuts the waxed linen with a single draw. The loose end falls to the table, barely visible, and he brushes it aside with the back of his hand. He closes the manuscript, lifting the pages carefully and letting them settle back into their resting position, then closes the cover over them. The boards come together with a soft sound, and he lifts the volume again, feeling its weight, and carries it to the cupboard where manuscripts of similar size are kept. The cupboard is tall, reaching nearly to his shoulder, and its shelves are deep enough to hold volumes stacked 2 or 3 deep when necessary. He opens the door. It requires a firm pull to release the latch, and peers inside at the arrangement of texts. Each manuscript rests on its side, the spine facing outward, the foredge tucked back against the rear of the shelf. Some are wrapped in cloth. Others rest in wooden cases lined with felt. A few lie bare, their leather bindings dark and gleaming faintly in the light that reaches them from the lamps behind him. He finds the gap where this manuscript belongs, between a gospel book bound in red leather and a collection of homilies in plain brown. And he slides it into place, pushing it back until it aligns with the others, until the spines form an even row. The leather of the new arrival touches the leather of its neighbors with a whisper, and he adjusts its position slightly, making sure it sits square, making sure the weight distributes properly across the shelf's surface. There are other manuscripts on the table, 3 more, stacked one atop the other, waiting for the same attention. The examination, the assessment, the return to their places. He lifts the topmost volume, feeling the boards flex slightly under his grip, and carries it to the lectern where the light is better, where he can see the condition of the binding clearly. This one is older. The leather has dried and cracked along the spine, the cracks forming a pattern like a river delta, branching and rebranching into smaller and smaller lines. He runs his thumb along the spine, feeling the texture of the damage, the way the surface has lost its flexibility, has become something closer to bark than leather. The cracks are shallow, They have not yet reached the stitching beneath, have not yet compromised the integrity of the binding itself. But they will need attention before long. Oil worked into the leather to restore some measure of suppleness, to slow the drying, to preserve what remains. He opens the cover, checking the hinges where the board meets the spine, looking for separation, for loose stitching, for the small failures that announce themselves before they become large ones. The stitching holds. The board is secure. Inside, the pages are clean and undamaged, the vellum still smooth, still sound. He closes the manuscript and sets it aside, then reaches for the next one in the stack. The lamp nearest the reading desk has begun to smoke. He notices it first as a change in the quality of light, a dimming, a flicker that was not there before, and then as a smell, faint but distinct, the scent of oil burning imperfectly, of a wick that has grown too long and begun to char at its tip, rather than consuming cleanly. He sets down the manuscript he holds and crosses to the lamp, moving without haste but with purpose, his attention fixed on the small flame behind its horn pane. The lamp hangs in an iron bracket fixed to the wall, the bracket shaped like a curved arm reaching outward to hold the light away from the stone. The body of the lamp is bronze, darkened by age and heat, its surface warm when he reaches up to touch it, testing the temperature with his fingertips before committing his hand to a firmer grip. The flame inside flickers and wavers, throwing shadows that dance across the wall, and he can see now what he suspected. The wick has mushroomed at its end, the charred portion spreading into a blackened cap that produces more smoke than light. The smoke rises in a thin gray stream, collecting against the inside of the horn pane and leaving a faint, dark residue that will need to be cleaned if the lamp is to give its full illumination. He lifts the lamp from its bracket, taking the weight of it in both hands. The bronze is heavier than it appears, solid and dense, and he can feel the warmth radiating from the oil reservoir through the metal. He carries it carefully to the table, holding it level so that the oil inside does not slosh, so that the flame does not gutter or leap. The table is clear now, the manuscripts removed, and he sets the lamp down on the wood with a soft metallic sound, then reaches for the small wooden box that sits on the shelf beneath. The box contains the tools for tending lamps, scissors for trimming wicks, a thin rod for adjusting their position in the oil, small scraps of linen for wiping soot, a spare piece of horn should a pane crack from heat. He opens the lid and removes the scissors, feeling their weight in his hand, the coolness of the iron against his palm. The blades are narrow and sharp, designed for precision, and when he opens them they move with a faint metallic whisper, the hinge smooth from use and the occasional drop of oil. He lifts the horn pane from the lamp, sliding it up and out of the bronze frame that holds it. The warmth of the flame touches his face immediately, a gentle heat that carries the smell of burning oil more strongly now that nothing stands between him and the source. The wick burns in the center of the lamp, rising from the oil like a small dark finger, its tip glowing orange and capped with the charred mushroom that has caused the smoke. He brings the scissors close, positioning the blades on either side of the wick just below the blackened portion, and he can feel the heat of the flame against his knuckles, against the backs of his fingers. The proximity requires care. Too close and the metal of the scissors will grow hot enough to burn. Too far and the cut will be imprecise, will leave too much wick or take too much away. He adjusts his grip, angles the blades, and closes them with a single smooth motion. The charred portion falls away, dropping into the oil where it floats for a moment before the weight of the char pulls it under. The flame dips and wavers, deprived of its fuel for a heartbeat, and then it steadies and grows brighter, the wick now burning clean, the light it gives no longer dimmed by smoke. He watches for a moment, making sure the flame has found its proper height, that it draws oil evenly. Satisfied, he sets the scissors aside and lifts one of the linen scraps from the box. The cloth is soft and slightly stiff with old wax, darkened in places from previous cleanings. He wraps it around his finger and reaches into the lamp, wiping the inside of the bronze body where soot has begun to collect, where the residue of imperfect burning has left its mark. The cloth comes away dark, and he folds it to find a clean spot, then wipes again, working his way around the interior until the bronze shows through clean and dull gold in the lamplight. The pane requires the same attention. He holds it up to the light, tilting it to see where smoke has left its film, and he rubs the inside surface with the cloth, feeling the slight resistance as the soot comes away, and it becomes translucent again. The outside receives the same treatment, though it is cleaner, touched only by dust that has settled during the hours the lamp has burned. He replaces the pane, sliding it back into its frame, and the light immediately softens, diffuses, spreads more evenly across the table and the nearby shelves. The lamp is ready. He lifts it again, feeling its warmth, and carries it back to the wall bracket, settling it into place with a soft clink of bronze against iron. There are other lamps to check. He moves to the next one, mounted on a bracket near the cupboard, and he peers at the flame through its pane, watching for the telltale flicker, for the thinning of smoke that would indicate a wick grown long. This one burns clean. The flame is steady and bright, casting its light downward onto the cupboard doors and the floor below. The third lamp hangs above the lectern, and when he approaches it, he can see the faint shimmer in the air above the flame. Heat rising, carrying the scent of warm oil and beeswax. The wick here has not mushroomed, but it has grown long enough that the flame reaches higher than it should, closer to the bronze cap that sits above it to direct the smoke away from the room. He lifts this lamp as well, carries it to the table, removes the pane. The scissors open and close, and another charred tip falls into the oil. The flame settles back to its proper height, and he wipes the interior of the lamp with a fresh portion of the linen, removing the fine dust that has collected there, ensuring that nothing will interfere with the clean burning of the wick. The pane is wiped. The lamp is returned to its place. He stands for a moment beneath the lamp, looking up at the flame, watching the way it burns without wavering, without smoke, giving its light steadily into the room. The manuscripts on the shelves remain in shadow and gentle illumination, protected from the heat, separated from the flame by careful distance and constant attention. The scissors are returned to their box. The soiled linen is set aside. His hands carry the faint smell of smoke and oil, and he wipes them on his robe, feeling the rough wool absorb what remains. The doorway to the choir study stands open, a dark, rectangular gap in the stone wall at the far end of the library. He crosses to it, leaving the warmth of the brazier behind, and steps through into the smaller chamber beyond. The air here is cooler, less touched by heat, and it carries a different quality of stillness, the sense of a space used by many but empty now, waiting. The room is not large. 3 lecterns stand along the walls, each one heavy and tall, built to hold volumes too large for a single reader to manage at a table, too weighty to be carried easily from place to place. These are the books meant for shared use, for multiple eyes reading the same text at once, and their presence here speaks of purposes that extend beyond the solitary work of the library proper. A lamp burns on a shelf near the door, and its light reaches across the room to touch the nearest lectern, to catch the metal clasps of the volume resting there. He approaches, his footsteps loud now against stone, and he places his hands on the lectern's slanted surface, feeling the wood worn smooth by the pressure of countless forearms resting while pages were turned above. The book on the lectern is enormous. Its boards are oak, thick as his wrist, covered in leather that has been tooled with geometric patterns around the edges and reinforced at the corners with brass fittings gone green with age. The spine is broad, the stitching visible as thick cords that stand above the leather. He checks the angle first, the position of the book on the lectern's rest. The volume sits slightly askew, turned a few degrees to the left, and he can see in the wear on the wood beneath it, the lighter patches where the leather has not rested, the darker grooves where it has, that this is not its usual position. Someone has moved it, has turned it to catch better light or to accommodate a different stance, and has not returned it to true. He places both hands on the boards, one at the top edge, one at the bottom, and he lifts slightly, taking just enough of the weight to free the book from the friction that holds it. He rotates it with care, watching the edge align with the groove in the wood, feeling the resistance as the leather meets the depression it has worn over years of resting in this exact position. When it sits square, he lowers it again, pressing down gently to settle it, and the alignment is restored. The clasps need checking. There are 2, one at the foredge near the top, one near the bottom, each consisting of a brass plate fixed to the front board and a hinged strap that wraps around to meet a catch on the back. The upper clasp is fastened, the strap pulled tight, the tongue of the catch seated properly in its keeper. But the lower clasp hangs open, the strap dangling free, and when he lifts it, he can see that the brass has loosened slightly where it attaches to the leather, the rivets working their way out of the board beneath. He presses the rivet heads with his thumb, testing their give, and he can feel the movement, slight but present. The repair will require tools he does not have with him now, will require removing the strap entirely and refastening it with new rivets or with stitching to reinforce what the metal alone can no longer hold. For now, he leaves the clasp open, hanging free where it will not strain the weakened attachment, and he makes note of the need, adding it to the list of tasks that accumulate like dust, like the slow failures of material over time. He opens the cover, lifting the front board with both hands. Its weight is substantial, and the hinges creak as they take the strain, leather flexing where it has been scored to allow the fold. The board falls back against the lectern's support with a soft thud, and the first page is revealed. Thick vellum, nearly stiff as board itself, covered in text written large enough to be read from a distance, the letters formed in red and black ink, the lines spaced wide. The pages show the marks of use. Fingerprints darken the margins where hands have steadied the book, while others turn the leaves. The lower corners are worn soft, the vellum thinned by the repeated friction of fingers finding purchase, lifting, turning. There are small stains, wax dripped and scraped away, a splash of water dried to a pale ring. The ghost of a thumb pressed into the margin. He turns one page, then another, not reading, only observing, checking for tears, for loose stitching in the binding, for places where the vellum has begun to separate from its gathering. The pages are sound. The stitching holds. He closes the book, bringing the cover down slowly, guiding it with his hands so that it does not fall with its full weight, so that the impact does not stress the binding. The second lectern holds a volume of similar size, and he crosses to it, his shadow moving with him across the floor. This book is closed and latched, both clasps fastened. When he tests them, they are secure, the brass tight against the leather, the rivets solid. He does not open it. The position is true, the angle correct, the weight distributed evenly across the rest. The third lectern stands in the corner, and the book upon it is the largest of all, too heavy for one person to lift safely, requiring 2 sets of hands to move it from storage to stand and back again. The boards are reinforced with iron straps, and the clasps are iron as well, black and heavy. And when he presses his hand to the cover, he can feel the coldness of the metal through the leather, can feel the slight dampness that gathers on iron in cool air. He checks the straps, running his fingers along the edges where they meet the boards, looking for separation, for rust, for the slow degradation that comes when metal and leather exist together in moisture. The straps are sound. The book rests secure, aligned, maintained. He returns to the library and crosses to the reading desk near the wall. The bench beside it is narrow, backless, its wood worn smooth by years of use. He lowers himself onto it with care, feeling the effort in his knees. The bench receives his weight, and he sits. A closed manuscript lies before him. He does not remember placing it there, but it rests beneath his hands now. the leather of its cover cool at first, and then warming slowly where his palms meet it. The boards are solid beneath the leather, unyielding, and he can feel the slight texture of the tooling. The shallow channels pressed into the surface in patterns he does not trace, does not follow. His hands simply rest. The lamp on the wall bracket burns beside him, close enough that he can feel its warmth on his right shoulder, on the side of his face. The heat is gentle, steady, and it seeps through the wool of his robe, through the linen beneath. Somewhere in the abbey, a door closes. The sound travels through stone, through corridors he cannot see, arriving in the library as something soft and distant. He hears it, notes it, and it passes. His breathing has slowed, the air moving in and out of his body at a pace that matches the stillness of the room. The slow burning of the lamps, the unmoving manuscripts on their shelves. Each breath fills his chest and empties it, and between one breath and the next there is space, there is quiet. The manuscript beneath his hands holds its shape. The leather has taken what warmth his palms can give, and holds it now, no longer cool, no longer distinct from his own temperature. His fingers rest without pressing, without purpose, simply making contact with the surface, with the object that exists beneath them. The lamplight falls across the desk, across his hands, across the manuscript. It does not flicker. The flame burns, and the light it gives remains constant, unchanged by his presence or his stillness. Another sound reaches him from elsewhere in the abbey, footsteps perhaps, or the scrape of wood against stone, something too muffled by distance to name with certainty. It arrives and fades, and the library returns to its own quiet, its own absence of sound that is not silence, but the accumulated softness of books and stone and air that has nowhere else to be. The bench remains firm beneath him. The manuscript rests where it is, unchanged. Lamplight lies across the room, on stone, on wood, on leather, and stays there, holding the library gently in its warmth.